Over these mountains is Iran, a regime that has succeeded in cutting many of its people off from the outside world. But disturbing stories detailing the authorities' brutal retribution, systematic sexual violence against anti-regime protesters have begun leaking out. We've come here to the Kurdish region of Iraq to try and find out more. This is Hannah, not her real name. A Kurdish Iranian woman recently smuggled out of Iran. She fears for her life. After taking off and burning her headscarf on the streets, she was arrested and detained by Iranian intelligence officers.
They choose the women who were pretty and suited their appetite. Then the officer would take one of them from the cell to a smaller, private room. They would sexually assault them there.
Hannah isn't only an eyewitness, she also was violated.
I feel shy talking about this. You can still see what the policeman did. Look here, on my neck. It's purplish. That is why I'm covering it. He forced himself on me.
Then a fight broke out with another protester, drawing away Hannah's attacker. Hannah and others could hear screams, and they believe a woman was raped in an interrogation room. Hannah sketched out the police station as she remembers it. She estimates 70 to 80 men and women were together in a main hall that accessed 4 private interrogation rooms. It was in these interrogation rooms, she says, that she was assaulted and others were raped. CNN was able to locate the police station through Hannah's description, eyewitness corroboration, and geolocation using key landmarks. It's in the Islamabad neighborhood of Urmia. Based on this testimony and speaking to a number of sources, a pattern of repression comes into focus. Police centers used as filtration points, moving protesters from one location to another, often families left not knowing where their loved ones are held. One Iraq-based Kurdish militant opposition party, PAK, identified over 240 people who they believe are missing within this maze of detention centers. Human rights organizations believe the number is higher, in the thousands. Some of the victims as young as 14. Many are men supporting female protesters, their punishment as severe as the women's.
They brought 4 men over who'd been beaten, screaming intensely in another cell, and one of the men who was tortured was sent to the waiting room where I was. I asked him what all that screaming was about. He said they are raping the men.
Based on witness testimony, CNN traced the location to an Iranian army intelligence headquarters. Voiced here by a translator, a 17-year-old boy sent CNN a voice note following his imprisonment. We are withholding his name and location for his safety.
When a security guard heard me discussing the rape of the other inmates, he started torturing me all over again. They raped me from behind.
Even as authorities visited sexual violence on protesters, regime figures accused female protesters of prostitution, of, quote, wanting to be naked. Of the incidents of sexual violence against protesters inside Iranian detention facilities, most occurred in the Kurdish majority areas to the west of Iran, home to a historically oppressed minority. Disturbingly, in some cases, the rapes were filmed and used to blackmail protesters into silence. There has been a real escalation, where female protesters are, as you can see here, being openly assaulted, often sexually. But the violence against women, like the protests, are not confined to the Kurdish areas. They are often focused on locations where the protests are most intense, like here in the capital, Tehran. One of these stories is Armita Abbasi's, a typical 20-year-old on social media, sharing her love of animals and music. In social media posts appearing under her name, Abbasi, like many young women in Iran, criticized the regime openly after the protests began. Unlike most, she did it without anonymity. It didn't take long for security forces to find and arrest her. Abbasi disappeared. Soon after, whistleblowers began to post on various social media platforms. Medics sharing eyewitness accounts of what had been done to Abbasi. First of all, they say, there were a few plainclothes men with her and they did not let her out of their sight. Even during a private medical examination, they were there. She was my patient. I went to her bedside. They had shaved her hair. She was scared and was trembling. When she first came in, they said it was rectal bleeding due to repeated rape. The plainclothesmen insisted that the doctor write that the rape was from prior to her arrest, and then after this issue was becoming obvious to all, they changed the entire scenario altogether. The details of these leaks were confirmed to CNN by an insider at Imam Ali Hospital, where Abbasi was brought to be examined. In a statement, the government said Abbasi was treated for digestive problems. The medics who treated her said that was not true. The Iranian regime denies the rape, accusing her of leading protests, an allegation which could see her face the death penalty. At this usually busy border crossing between Iraq and Iran, it is deceptively quiet. Those who can cross tell us the noose is tightening on protesters. Authorities have for decades used sexual torture against Iranians, and it appears once more a familiar pattern. Sexual violence deployed to enforce an assertion of moral guardianship.